something that came across my mind is when you want to story tell, is there a fiber of honesty and authenticity that is prerequisite? Because you can deliver a message, you can deliver a communication, but to deliver a story, there's a bit of that authenticity and honesty that is needed in anything that you do. And therefore great storytellers, in my view, from what I think you were talking about, are people who are probably very authentic in what they do, and therefore the ability to tell the story is far more effective. Is that a good assumption to make? And is that does that make sense to you at all?
Very, very much, Sobi. Completely critical, right? Because this is one of the biggest pushbacks that you will get, or the wrong assumptions that people have that, अरे वो तो कहानीबाज है, right? He just keeps telling stories, and the assumption is that stories is fiction and there is fact, and they both are very different. So that's not true, right? Of course, as I mentioned, there is a world of fiction in storytelling, but don't look be very. I'm telling the listeners of this podcast that be self. I mean, think about your own growth, right? That just because somebody in your organization uses quote unquote storytelling in a bad way, let's say they're not being authentic, they're not doing the right thing, and they give a bad reputation to the word or term storytelling, that doesn't mean you have to say that, just because that guy does it badly, I will not use this technique at all. It doesn't make
Hmm.
sense, right? Usko jo karna hai, let that person do what he or she wants. You don't miss out on the benefits you can get by being an authentic storyteller, right? So if you're assuming, I'm assuming that the person who wants to apply this is genuine and honest, and so what does he or she needs to keep in mind? So I call it the ACE model, ACE, right? In order to be a good storyteller, you need to have A, C, and E. What is A is authenticity. You cannot tell a story with lies, with fiction, unless you tell it upfront that, hey, this reminds me of that fable. Then it's fine because you're telling, or this reminds me of that movie story. You're telling it is fiction. But if you're telling that, hey, this is what the data is telling, then to the extent possible. Now, of course, data can be complicated and you may miss out on some elements genuinely. But if you're, you should do your best to have the entire complete truth. And authenticity to me, Swami, is alignment, right? Alignment between three things. Alignment between your thoughts and your words. That means you're able to say what you think in a clear way, not mincing words, not saying thinking one thing but saying something else, which we know a lot of people tend to do that. And alignment between your words and your actions, because if you say a lot of things but you don't follow it up, if you are a person who constantly is berating your team, and then you go up in a company offsite and then say, hey, respect is very important, but you don't actually respect your people, there's no alignment between your words and your actions. So thoughts, words, actions have to be aligned for you to be a good storyteller. um, then what is C and D, right? So C to me is clarity and the comprehensive data and facts, right? So often what may happen is that you feel that I'm authentic and I have complete, I believe this completely, but you probably don't have the data and facts to back it up. So the example that I keep thinking of is sometimes in non-profits, what happens is people are so passionate and they believe that, yes, we must do this and we must, this is the biggest problem that needs to be solved. Have you looked at the data? Is it really the biggest problem that needs to be solved? And especially our biases come into play, emotions come into play. Unemotionally, can you actually look at the data with other people? Does the data support your authentic belief? So just try and look at that. So that's the second part of it. Now the third part, which kind of comes in a way as a counterbalance to authenticity, right? Because a lot of people use authenticity to say free pass. I can say what I feel. If I don't like somebody, I can just berate them in front of everybody. I'm being authentic, right? You telling me be authentic. Now what is your problem if I authentically berate everybody in my, I don't honestly feel that, I'm saying that's why I'm doing it. So the third E to me is empathy, right? So if you have to be empathetic to your audience and look at whatever you're saying, um, how will they think and how will they feel when you're saying what you're saying, right? So have that balance between authenticity and empathy. And empathy means two three things, right? One is that if I'm explaining something complicated, then immediately the empathy part in my mind should realize, oh, are you getting it or not? If I am using Hindi in a podcast, immediately, oh, there might be audiences who don't understand Hindi, so let me quickly translate. If I'm using jargon that only my team or my company understands, oh no, my audience may not understand this jargon, let me stop. So that empathy meter, tuck tuck tuck, should be keep ringing when it perceives that this guy may not understand it, right? Or you're looking for facial cues and body language cues that this is not going through. So that's on the understanding, and empathy also on the, so what is the audience thinking and what are they feeling, right? And that's a trickier one. I did People struggle with this more often than not. That I may say something very bluntly, but is that the best thing to do? Is that the best way to say it? Can I be more empathetic in saying something which needs to be said, but in a nicer way, so that it doesn't crush or defeat that person? So that's a good model for people to keep in mind, the ACE model: authenticity, the clear comprehensive truth, and the empathy.
So, so we talked about authenticity, and so imagine, there has been a crisis in the company. Sales are down. I have a sales meeting, and I'm the sales head, right? Now, there are two ways to manage this. One is to actually go back and talk about budget versus achievement versus ability to uh, you know uh, get action which is much better than what we did last month. So therefore, if I were a sales head, how would I use a story?
Yeah.
And there is a real negative situation where I'm down by 40%. So you just can't stay away from that fact, right? So that's one thing that I wanted. Uh, how would you go about doing it?
Sorry. Yeah. So no, this is also one of those tough situations, right? Not an easy situation. And I actually believe sometimes bad news delivery is an opportunity for a good storyteller to build his or her reputation or brand. Why? Because often, the majority of the times when you have bad news to deliver, people try and sugarcoat it. Hide is the worst thing, or sugarcoat is saying that, hey, it's not bad. Actually, that division did not do too badly. Overall, I know we didn't achieve, but this division did a good thing, and in this month we were still okay, and so on, right? So it's the audience is hearing all of this saying, "Are you hiding something?" So then every time you share something, the audience is like, can I really trust this person? Even if there is actually genuinely good news, they'll be like, no, I'm not so sure, right? So trust is the bedrock of any relationship. So as a communicator, you have to constantly keep that in mind. And so my the suggestion for people when they have to give bad news is two parts, right? One is lay it out. So I call it the what, why, what next framework. What happened? Don't beat around the bush, directly say. And I would kind of, the wording could be something like this: that, hey guys, okay, let me be upfront here, we don't have great news to share this quarter, so I'm going to be upfront. So we have not met our targets, we have fallen short by 20%, or we are not going to be able to meet our incentives this. But I'm going to tell you our analysis of why that has happened, and what are we going to do to make amends, to make things better again. So you have to immediately follow up the what with the why, and that why has to be as deep as possible. Go to the root cause of it. So you have to do that hard work before you start this communication, and then have an action plan to get out of that mess, right? And of course, even if you are completely not having it and you want audience, then you can say, we've got some ideas, but we'd love for you to come and help us to build this action plan. So the what, why, what next will tell people that at least you're being upfront, and I can trust you, and if things are bad, you're not going to hide it from me. And I can also, I sense that you're in some form of control to try and do it, and hopefully things will become better from there. Then it's not just about being logical and analytical and doing this. You can also think of stories to inspire, and especially towards the end, right, when people are um, a little disillusioned or thinking that, can we really do this, and this is not this seems too tall an order, and this has been such a bad quarter, how will we turn things around? Think of examples and stories, ideally from your own firm, from the past. And I'm sure if you dig, especially if it's a reasonably, tenured firm, you will find enough examples from the past, right? That this happened, a very difficult situation came in the past, and it seemed all down and out, but this is what we did, and this is how we raised, right? So an inspiring story from your own firm from the past. Ideally, if you're telling that story, don't reveal the ending, right? You can, make it like a mystery. By the way, I want to tell you something that, in 19, I don't know, maybe not as far back as that, in 2017, there was a team which was struggling, and then they had this, and their metrics had fallen, and then they decided to do something, and by 2019 it all came back. By the way, you know what, that which was that team? It was this team. So towards the end, when you kind of, bring it out as a surprising thing, then that element of surprise and, that inspiration all kind of hit you together. So if you have your own firm, I think that's a great way to end this sort of a conversation. I know of a guy who would was brilliant at motivating frontline salespeople, because there it becomes very emotion driven, and he would happily take examples from movies. एंड देन ही विल से दैट दीवार मूवी में एक रहीम चाचा थे और एक विजय था. There was Rahim Chacha character and Vijay. And Rahim Chacha would happily go and pay the this, but Vijay was the one who said that I will not pay the 2 rupee whatever fine, and I will fight. So I need Vijay's in my team. I don't need Rahim Chachas in my team. And he will, like, use these analogies from movies and all. And Vishal Amrawat from Beable, brilliant storyteller, but that, works with that audience, right? So as I mentioned, a lot of these are context and this dependent, but in a senior corporate audience, I would definitely suggest what why what next, so that people have that assurance. And if there is possible, then use an inspiring story from your own team, from a similar team. That's a good way for people to end it.